Hello! We return once again to the semi-annual book review I do, like every few months or years, depending on how often you regularly look at my channel. Now, I have a special treat for you because I recently went to the local used bookstore, which is run by my local library, which is great because it means I have an excuse to spend money there because it helps the library. And I picked up 7 books. Well, okay, I picked up one at a yard sale across the street at a church, but I'm going to, just for this purpose, I'm just going to say they're all from the same place. And I'm going to share them all with you because I'm a douche who thinks that because he reads a lot of books, it makes him superior. First up, Red November. Now, this book is about the secret war between the United States and the Soviet Union when it came to submarines. Now, the Cold War is the Cold War. It never officially got hot, but submarine captains were going back and forth on both sides of the Atlantic and everywhere else, just kind of doing missions for their respective governments. And subs were on the front lines of the Cold War, really. They're useful as intelligence gathering assets. They can tap underwater cables. They can track just about anything at sea. Not to mention the fact that our ICBM subs can literally be anywhere in the world, which makes attacking the United States or the Soviet Union, who also had them, basically a death sentence. I've really gotten into submarines over the last year or so after I bought a Tom Clancy book where he gets a tour of a couple guided submarines and he talks about the history and the different equipment on board. So this looks like it's going to be very interesting. I gave a quick glance through it when I was in the shop, and it describes missions from Korea all the way to, I'm sure, the late 80s, so going to be a special treat for me. Next up, Vietnam by Lonely Planet, which is a bit different because it's not a military-based book or science fiction like I usually read. This is a travel guide to Vietnam, but having an interest in the Vietnam War, I wondered, well, why don't I read a little bit on the culture and the geography a bit more, especially because, as you can see at the bottom, it talks about the indigenous hill people, the Montagnards, who have a very interesting history and are intertwined with the Vietnam War heavily. They served as guides and soldiers in the special forces. So I'm excited for that. It looks pretty interesting. Got the store recommended it. This one's also kind of a treat. Recollections and Letters of Robert E. Lee. This is a book full of, well, letters from Robert E. Lee. These go from, I believe, his time fighting in the Mexican-American War in 1846 all the way to his last days before his death in the late 1860s. Or was it the 1870s? I can't remember. But, this is really interesting. I mean, it's, 400 pages of just letters. And really, letters back then were a great way, really the only form of communication besides actually talking to someone or sending a message vocally for someone else. So, really, these are the innermost thoughts of this man, who is pretty controversial, no matter how you look at him, but it was a great tactician, at least, for his day. So, I'm excited to kind of get a look at this, because I'm a bit of a Civil War buff. Next up is Seal of God, which is I believe, an autobiography about a gentleman who joins the Navy SEALs. I don't know anything else, but his friend is a SEAL, I guess, and he's killed, and he goes, so I'm going to do it. And the back states that it is about his training to go through basic underwater demolitions, the main course SEALs go through, followed by finishing school, and then his service in Iraq. I have a lot of books in Navy SEALs. I think I have more books in Navy SEALs than I do in any other specific subject, not counting, like, World War II, which is kind of vague. So, it's good to add something to it. I guess, maybe I'll do a whole separate video, just stack of, 10 books I have on SEALs, so. But yeah, I'm excited for this one, too. We're not done yet, by the way. I have 4 more books. This is 3, not 4. I have S.M. Sterling's Dies in the Fire. This is going to be kind of hard to explain, but about 2 or 3 years ago, from the same used bookstore, I bought his Nantucket trilogy, which is 3 books, for about $1, because you can get 3 shock covers for $1, and that dealt with the island of Nantucket being sent back to the Bronze Age. Well, this book basically is the reverse, because at the same time Nantucket's sent back to the Bronze Age, the rest of the world is thrown into darkness as technology ceases to work. I mean, motors won't run, gunpowder no longer combust, electricity simply ceases to flow through power lines. It's as if someone has flipped the switch off of physics. And the world quickly turns into this feudal society of tribes fighting each other and, you know, fiefdoms, kingdoms, slavery, you know, most things you'd see on a Black Friday at Walmart. So I'm excited for that, especially because there are some cameos and mentions to the Nantucket series, which, to be honest, I actually have never finished. I keep putting down the last book. It's over there still. Mocking me. But, yeah, hopefully I can get through this. It's part of a larger series, but I think, you know, it's S.M. Sterling, who's, you know, up there with Turtlelove as one of the best, you know, pseudo-historical sci-fi writers out there. Speaking of which, I also have Michael Crichton's Timeline. This is a time travel novel. There's a movie based on it. This movie's fucking garbage. But, I'm really excited to see this, because I watched a review by this guy Nick Hodges, who does a show called History Buffs, where he does reviews of historical films, and he talked about how the book is so good. You know, Michael Crichton, the same guy who wrote Jurassic Park, does a ton of research on the period they go back to. They go back to the 100 Years' War to rescue a professor who's been sent back there. And, I mean, it's not high on my list right now to read, since I have, like, again, I have, like, 7 or 8 of these, but, excuse me, McDonald's, but, you know, I mean, it's Michael Crichton, he's a pretty good writer. I read, Pirate Latitude by him, which was actually written after his death. It was, like, somewhat written, and they kind of fleshed it out, and that was a little meh, but this is Crichton actually working at his best, not working after death, so. 2 more. Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Checklist, which, despite having the word Tom Clancy on it, is actually by David Michaels, which I believe is a pseudonym. I really got into playing Splinter Cell and, you know, Ghost Recon over the last few months, and I gotta say, they're both fun series. A lot of Clancy's early stuff in, you know, the 2000s really is good, and this, from what I've read, is okay. It's a prequel to the first Splinter Cell game, but, you know, reading it, it's what you'd expect from a Splinter Cell book. Sam Fisher sneaking around in the shadows, people buzzing in his ear telling him, oh, be careful, Fisher. A somewhat Clancy-esque plot that seems somewhat plausible, sometimes super ridiculous. You know, again, 3 for $1, I got this, so, I've been reading it, I'm probably, like, maybe 90 pages in it. It's pretty good for, you know, you get what you get when you pick up something like this, so. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but if you're a Splinter Cell fan, it's a nice bit of fluff. And that leads us to our last book, by Mark Baker, Nam. This one I got at the yard sale across the street, and it seems to be an account of the Vietnam War from the point of view of a soldier. To quote it, actually, the Vietnam War in the words of the soldiers who fought there. I assume this is going to be like The Things They Carried, which is a similar book with several short stories about Vietnam. This, I mean, the cover caught my eye. You have the, you know, you have an M16 with a red beret, which Nam, and a smoking village hamlet in the background. So, I have high hopes for this, especially because this is a book that's published, you know, in the 60s, sorry, the 70s or 80s. And, you know, books like that tend to be a little more gritty when they talk about the war. They tend to have a war at stake because the war has still been going on, whereas, you know, a few years before, whereas today, the books are a bit more neutral in not trying to prove themselves. Not to say that, you know, they have to, it's just that back then, a lot of the guys who were in Vietnam made it a point to point out, like, we did this was heroic. The same way that a lot of World War II documentaries from the early 2000s to do stuff like that, so, you know. So, yeah, that was 7 books I bought because I'm an entitled first world brat that I am, you know, wanted to share with you. And you have anything to say in the comments, you know, maybe some suggestions, maybe some questions, maybe, you know, making fun of me, and calling me several rude names, because someone always seems to do that, who just randomly shows up, you know, post them. Also, don't like my videos if you don't like it, because I'm not one of those idiots. It's like, oh, like the video, subscribe. But, you know, I hope you enjoyed this. Cheers. The mouse didn't disappear. Now it's going there. Cheers.